Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Nate, and this is That Baldwin Life, where we do product reviews, DIY stuff for your Vanagon, and most importantly, epic Westie adventures. In today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to compare the two most popular big brake kits for your Vanagon. On the van now, we have the SmallCar kit. We recently picked up the Burley Motorsports kit. We'll be tearing off the SmallCar kit, comparing the two systems, and letting you see the differences. So we have the wheels off the van, safely on jack stands, and this is what our SmallCar kit looks like. We picked this kit up in 2016, and it probably has 50 or 60,000 pretty hard miles on it, big mountain passes, water crossings, dirt roads, gravel, just about anything you can throw at it. It's held up pretty good. The rotors are getting a little warped now, a little shimmy under hard braking. They're developing a little bit of a lip on the top of the rotor here, which is pretty common after a number of hard miles. So we're going to take this kit off and then compare piece by piece against the Burley kit and show you the differences. This is the SmallCar kit. It's 280 millimeters in diameter, 25 millimeters thick, and vented. The Burley kit comes with a 288 millimeter rotor, so a little bit bigger. It's also vented, but it's also cross-drilled and slotted. We'll see if that really makes a difference in heat management or not in the long term. By comparison, the stock Vanagon rotor on our van was 258 millimeters in diameter. So both of these are a big upgrade in terms of rotor diameter on your van. Rotor diameter will make the biggest impact in your stopping distance. And so this is why most people upgrade to a bigger brake kit. Isn't for the caliper size particularly, it's for the rotor size. This is the SmallCar hub that was on our van. Of course, it still has the bearings and races installed and the grease. I'm not going to clean all that out for the comparison, but this appears to be a machined down factory Vanagon rotor. Now, we bought this kit back in 2016, and I don't know if they're still using this or not, but this we got with our kit. The Burley hub is a billet machine piece of steel that's aftermarket. It also comes with pressed-in studs, and it seems like a very, very nicely built unit. Both are comparable in size and weight. I don't think you have a problem with either one. It's just really more your preference. The part everyone's probably been waiting for are calipers. This is probably the biggest discussion on the forums. What's the best caliper for the van, stock, G60s, 57s. We're going to go other Audi, we're going to go Brembo, we're going to go Porsche, Ford, Toyota. There's lots of options out there. All the kits out there that you can buy off the shelf all tend to utilize Volkswagen and Audi calipers. So these two kits are not any different. The SmallCar kit uses the highly sought after and harder to get Girling G60 caliper. Now, this is a dual piston caliper. You see the two pistons versus the stock the single piston caliper on the Vanagon. This is a fantastic caliper overall. One of the issues with the G60 is sourcing. They are becoming more difficult to find. Rebuild kits are becoming a little scarcer, not impossible, but they haven't built this caliper in a long time. So that's something to keep in mind with the G60 system. The caliper from the Burley is the ATE/Girling 57 millimeter caliper. This is a single piston caliper. It uses one 57 millimeter piston versus the two pistons that are about 60 millimeters in diameter. Not each, but as a total. This caliper is much more available. This was used on the cars, I believe, up to 2012, so the aftermarket support is really big on this one. Pads are pretty cheap. This caliper overall is pretty easy to source. It's much more like the stock caliper on the Vanagon, which is a single piston. Interestingly enough, though, this is actually a smaller piston diameter than the stock Vanagon, at least on our van, the 87 and up, 86 and up, I believe. Was a 60 millimeter single piston. So this going down in size will be interesting to see if it affects braking performance at all. Now, it's been a while since we've had stock brakes on our van, and we've got the BMW brake booster as well, so we really can't do a lot of stock comparison. But when I put this on, I do expect the pedal travel to feel a little different over this one. It has a smaller piston, which will result in a slightly different pedal feel. The pedal will be, as I call, higher in the stroke. As you push down on it, you'll get pressure quicker because of the less fluid to move in the cylinder. This theoretically does have a little less clamping force than the stock even, and definitely less than the girdling. I don't know if that's going to make a real world difference or not, but we're going to find out. Along with calipers, of course, come brake pads. This is the G60 brake pad. It's fairly narrow, a little bit longer because it has dual pistons that can accept. This is the Burley brake pad that fits the ATE 57/G57 caliper. It's a little shorter and stouter, but it's also longer, or deeper, I guess, this way, which does tend to put more pad across the distance of the rotor, where this one has a smaller area. In fact, on this pad, we're not using the entire swept area of the rotor. There's a section on the rotor, maybe a 1/4 inch, that was never used in our rotor. That does provide all the additional pressure of that G60 caliper on a smaller area to heat up on that rotor. That might be the cause for the additional warping. I don't know, I'm just speculating. This does have, of course, a shorter distance side to side, but a longer swept area on the rotor. This actually has more braking surface area than this Girling G60 pad does. I believe this is 9,700 square millimeters, and this is like 11,300, so it's quite a bit more. Of course, as we talked, this caliper has a little less braking force than this one. So again, there's pluses and minuses on both, but we'll see in real world performance what we notice. These are the two caliper brackets that come with your kits. This is a small car kit for the G60 caliper. This has worked out really well for us, but something I didn't notice when I put the kit on originally is when I took it off, is these holes that are in the caliper carrier have been kind of oval out a little bit to fit the stock Vanagon spindles. Again, we haven't had any issues in the 60,000 miles, but it's definitely not the way that Volkswagen would have done it, so I can't say I'm really in love with that much, but again, it hasn't failed on us, and it's the only way without having an adapter bracket to get the G60 caliper to fit on your van. This is the Burley Motorsports caliper carrier. This is a custom designed piece Burley puts with the G57 or the ATE 57 calipers. This bolts right onto the Vanagon spindle, no modifications needed, no spacers, no washers. This is a really nice stout unit. In general, I don't like proprietary parts, but in the 30 plus years I've been wrenching on cars, I've never had to replace a caliper bracket. So I don't expect this to ever wear. It's not a wear item, but just be aware that it's something you can only get from Burley. We got our small car kit to get the stainless steel brake lines with it as well. It's a nice brake line. Both the Burley and the small car ones are almost identical. They're the same length. The Burley one does have some advantages that I think I like a bit better. It's a little bit better strain relief at the end. It has these kind of rubber pieces at the end to keep the strain relief. And most importantly, the small car one doesn't have the vinyl coating on the stainless steel braided line that the Burley one does. This tends to collect a lot of debris and dirt and grime that over the years can work its way in through the stainless steel coating and kind of break things down a little bit. This, I think, is a much better hose overall, though again, we've had no problems with this over the years. This one's really not much of a comparison because the small car kit doesn't come with anything. This is the stock dust shield that was on our van, and it's made for a smaller 258mm rotor, so the small car kit stuck out on the edges of that. Again, hasn't been a big deal for us, but we do appreciate that Burley provides a new stainless steel dust shield that fits their rotor much better. It's actually really nice looking as well. So let's get on with installing this brake system. First up is the dust shield that goes on. We're putting it so the BMS is backwards to us so you can see it from the inside. So it lines up just as the old dust shield does, using existing hardware. I really like that Burley gives a new dust shield here. Okay, let's get this race in here. started. We've got this bigger. Okay, so that race gets seated all the way down. Wash is seated evenly. So I won't go into a lot of detail about greasing the bearings. You can watch the wheel bearing maintenance video for that. Now for the hub, we're going to put a little bit of grease on this spindle. Back with the seal rides a little bit. Then we take our hub and we slide it over. The seal seated back there. And we put our inner bearing in. All the extra grease comes out. We just wipe it right off. Hold that bearing in, it's kind of spin it around, make sure it's no issues. And if you watched our wheel bearing maintenance video, you'll notice we put on these kind of trick Mercedes reusable axle nuts, and they clamp on versus the stock where they have to strike this down and kind of goes in this groove. Well, I don't really know what happened, but when I took off the passenger side, this was extremely hard to get off. I almost felt like it was marring up the threads on the spindle a little bit. And now either one of them, they get stuck a little bit. And I don't know if they've been deformed a little bit, if there's some issues with the threads on here. We don't have time to figure that out today, so we're going to go ahead and use the stock style nuts. And then if you have any ideas or suggestions on what happened with those nuts or what I did wrong, let me know and I'll get them fixed in the future. But for now, we're going to put the stock style nut back on. And this nut comes with the kit in Burley. So just like anything else, we're going to take our wrench and we're going to slowly tighten the nut while we spin the hub. Get the bearings seated. I'm going to tighten it so the hub gets very difficult to rotate. Right there. We're going to back it off a little bit. Spin it both directions. Get that grease worked in there really well. And back it off almost all the way so everything's loose. Just kind of spin it. Make sure no noises. And of course, the Bentley states that this washer should just barely move. So a little bit of pressure. It's a little tight right there. So that can barely move there. Now that we have the tension just right, we're going to take a blunt screwdriver, put it towards the edge of that nut. We're going to give it a few taps to kind of set that down into that groove. Check your tension again. It's good. Slide that over. You notice they should be directional. I mean, you can put them either way you want, but typically these go this direction. And the rotors are labeled as well. We're going to take an oversized nut and one of the lug nuts. The nut's just there for a spacer. Kind of clamp that down so we've got the rotor on there nice and tight. And since we've had some dirty hands here and there, we're going to clean this off just a little bit. Next up is a caliper bracket, and it goes on like this. So these kind of hooks go out. And we have our bolts, which we put some Loctite on. So Bentley says the factory bolts are torqued to 200 foot-pounds, which is a lot. So do what you got to do to get those torqued to where you feel comfortable. So here's your brand new caliper. These are the slide pins that go in. You need to pop these out first and put a little bit of the supplied grease on the pin. Not a lot, just enough to keep those pins from sticking. Put those back in. You have brake pads as well. You've got the outer pad that has the flat side and the inner pad with these spring clips. And these pads come with a wear sensor because they're for newer cars, and pretty sure your van doesn't have it, so we're just gonna go ahead and clip that off. So what happens is this pad goes on the inside. These little clips clip inside the piston. Make sure your hands are clean. That clips into there. And this pad then rides on the carrier here, like that. So we're going to push our bolts back so we can get them on. So they're flush there. We just kind of put this in. And then we take our 7mm Allen and we bolt our caliper to our carrier. One last thing with the calipers, we put this retention spring in. So this spring sits in these holes and kind of pushes against the carrier and the caliper. So you start this one up here, put that in, back, and then take a little screwdriver, just give these a little tap, make sure they're fully seated. Yeah, and they kind of ride on right there. So now comes our brake line. You've got the side that goes up to the body, has this longer kind of snout with the 14mm. And we have this side with the threads on it that goes into the caliper. Push this behind here. Make sure you do not cross thread this. Starting nice and slow by hand. Snug it up. This doesn't need to be uber tight. They're threads that tighten up as you go, so make it snug. If you'll find out if it's leaking when you go to bleed the brakes. You feed this back up through here. This goes up through, put your line in, and tighten it down. So you can do the initial tightening with a 11mm box end, but you will not be able to tighten it correctly with this. And then take your brake tool, and because this has a wraps around, keeps it from slipping off. Okay. Wipe off all the excess fluid so you'll know when you go to bleed the brakes if there's any leaking from right there. I'll just take a little bit of brake cleaner. Clean that off. So Burley gives the little clips. I'm just going to reuse my SmallCar ones because the hole's already drilled for it there. So this just goes up on here. And we did in the past, we drilled a little hole in this little lip of the upper arm. This feeds through into there. Snugged up on the air. What you want to make sure is it's not hitting, it's not binding anywhere. We'll put the wheels and tires on before we're done, and we'll turn them back and forth to make sure it's not rubbing anywhere. Before we do the full bleeding, we'll take our 10mm and we'll just do a little gravity bleeding, which is really just opening up the bleeder valve a little bit, and within a few minutes we'll see some fluid come out. And there we go. So now we have fluid in the caliper. To bleed the brakes, we've got our Motive Power Bleeder with our European/Volkswagen cap adapter for our master cylinder. So what we do is we pump it up to about 7 to 10 psi or so. And then down here we have a tube on the bleeder that goes to an old can of Pentosin. We use Pentosin Super .4 in our van. And all we do now is open the bleeder, and that 10 pounds of pressure will push the fluid up through the caliper and out, and we can see the bubbles in the line. See the air coming out? We've already bled the passenger side. You want to do the one furthest from the master cylinder first. We've already done that one. So when we stop seeing bubbles for a bit, we'll close it. And then we will go up, hit the brake pedal a few times to seat the caliper a little bit more, and do it again. Okay, we are done. Wheels are back on, torqued. We checked for interference with the brake lines. We're good to go. And look at those beauties in there. Next thing to do is take us on the road and see how she does. We're back from driving it, and here's my general first impressions. With the Burley kit using the smaller 57mm piston, the brake pedal rides a little bit higher in its travel. And by that I mean when you push on the brake pedal, you get pressure and pushback from the caliper a little bit sooner in the travel than you did with the Girling G60 caliper. I attribute that to being the smaller piston. It doesn't need as much travel to give that pressure. What that does is it gives it kind of a better initial feel than the G60s did. Now we have the BMW E30 brake booster as well, which does provide a little bit more, I guess, pressure or power for your pedal. But right now we love the way the brakes feel. I think they feel better than the Girling G60 calipers do overall. Do they have as much stopping power being the smaller piston? I don't know. Now, the pads aren't fully bedded in yet, and we really haven't done any real big emergency braking in it. But right now we're very happy with the way they feel. Well, that wraps up this comparison video between the SmallCar kit and the Burley kit. They both offer their advantages and disadvantages, and it's really up to you to decide what's right for you. We're going to keep the Burley kit on our van. We like the way the brake pedal feels, the stopping distances are fantastic, and we really like the way those cross-drilled rotors look behind our wheels. If you have any questions or comments about the video or about the install or anything else we can answer for you, please drop them down below. We'll get those addressed. Thanks a lot.